In the U.S., head researcher Bingo Minerva is searching for Yamashita treasure maps. Since the tapes Rick's been looking through suggest Robert Curtis had access to them,
The maps show the layers.
Bingo reaches out to a source familiar with Curtis.
So right now I'm in Las Vegas on my way to meet Brian Greenspun, who's currently the editor-in-chief of the Las Vegas Sun, the Pulitzer Prize-winning newspaper. Brian Greenspun had a lot of interactions with Robert Curtis. I want to see if he remembers anything specifically, see if he gave him any maps, any details. It would be really great to see one of these maps. Hey, Brian.
Hi. Good
Bingo.
morning. How are you?
Good to finally meet you, sir.
Nice to see you. Welcome to the Las Vegas Sun. My parents started it in 1950. So it's been in my life almost my entire lifetime. Yeah. So I guess I'm the keeper of the flame, let's say, right? That's my story. We've been around a long time and we've had a lot of headlines, but since you mentioned...
Over its 70-year history, the Las Vegas Sun has won numerous journalism awards, including a Pulitzer. Well known for their in-depth reporting, they've covered the search for Yamashita's treasure at length.
So the reason I'm here today is that I currently have a team in the Philippines that is treasure hunting for gold. We believe we're on a site that is a Yamashita treasure site. We've actually found evidence of Americans being on the property in what we believe is a Japanese tunnel.
Okay.
Now, through my research, I found out that you wrote about Robert Curtis back in the 70s, and that spanned for about 3 decades. So really the question I have is, how did you meet Robert Curtis? What was it about his story that, convinced you to even start writing this?
That's a simple question, but it's a very complex answer. So here comes a guy who walks into the office, noticeably frightened. He wanted to talk in the car. This was a guy who didn't trust anybody. He felt to me like he was running for his life. And then he starts telling this story about that treasure somewhere hidden deep somewhere. And so I had to figure out whether it was real. So I spent a lot of time with Bob. Why is he so afraid? Remember, this is 1978. Marcos was at the height of his power. He was in control.
President Ferdinand Marcos was reportedly brutal in his obsession to find Yamashita's treasure. After treasure hunter Roger Rojas claimed he found a cache of Yamashita's gold, Marcos allegedly imprisoned Rojas and seized his treasure. Rojas later filed a suit against Marcos to try and recover his stolen goods. Rojas died under suspicious circumstances the night before the trial began.
And of course, as it came out, Bob Curtis was afraid because he got out of the Philippines 10 seconds ahead of being killed, and so he thought. And he needed this story told in a most credible way, believing that once a story is out, there's no reason to kill him.
Robert Curtis first went to the Philippines to assist in President Ferdinand Marcos's quest to find Yamashita's gold. After several months of working for him, Curtis reportedly learned that Marcos had grown suspicious of him and ordered his assassination. Curtis immediately fled the Philippines and came directly to the Las Vegas Sun to share his story.
You have to be skeptical about it.
So even then, really, first impressions with you, you didn't really believe this story.
How could you believe this story? Who was Bob Curtis? He was a mining engineer from northern Nevada. How did he get in the middle of Ferdinand Marcos's hunt for a treasure? But there's no doubt in my mind that Bob Curtis knew that he had gotten himself in the middle of something really huge and very dangerous, that someone could kill him.
In a deposition made in 1993 during the Roger Rojas trial, Curtis claims he was recruited by Marcos to process recovered gold, removing identifying marks that could tie it to countries looted by Japan.
President Marcos wished to talk to me about the possibility of handling remelting of bars.
Eventually, Curtis was given access to Marcos's maps, which supposedly led to Yamashita treasure sites.
I was skeptical about his story, and my job was to find out if this guy was real and his story was real. But Bob had tapes, and Bob had memos, and Bob had maps. Well, we happened to have the ability at the time to get it authenticated, and I did.
So you're saying he's brought you actual Yamashita treasure maps?
I'm saying I saw maps that he claimed were maps to where the treasures were. And then he showed me pictures deep in these caverns of things that purported to be boxes that he said gold was in. I don't doubt that the maps, whatever the documents were, the conversations that were taped were real. We never would have printed it in our paper if we didn't believe it was true. In his head, printing the story meant that he was no longer vulnerable to being killed because of what he knew, because now everybody knew it.
So do you think in his mind, by printing that story, it offered him a bit of a cloud of protection?
Yes, oh, absolutely. That's why he came here. He said, let's make it as public as possible.
My main reason for revealing the story at all was the philosophy that if they're going to kill you anyway, take a chance and get the story out and hope that it creates such a stink that he won't dare do it now.
So these are the newspapers, the actual newspapers, from Curtis and all the information and whoever else we talked to. It's all in these stories. This was our first story. Strongman Marcos hunts $100 billion war treasure.
This is the very first story you
That's
printed?
the very first story, yes. Everything we learned that we believed was accurate came from Bob Curtis.
There's actually something I would like to show you and get your thoughts on.
Okay.
Okay, I have these tapes, and this is Bob Curtis's dying declaration.
Wow.
My name is Robert H. Curtis. If you are listening to this tape, I am dead. This tape will prove beyond anyone's doubt the truth of the story. In either event, this is a dying declaration.
So is that Bob Curtis's voice?
I've got chills. I mean, I have chills up and down my arms. Yeah, of course that's Bob Curtis. It's the same guy, and it's the same voice. I heard this fear in this man's voice. He was scared. This confirms everything that we believed at the time we first met Bob Curtis, and what we proved to ourselves was true.
On January 24th, 2004, the Las Vegas Sun printed an obituary announcing the death of Robert Curtis at 74 years old. His exact cause of death was never publicly revealed.
Are you aware of any other leads, any information that'll lead me to any Americans treasure hunting in the Philippines?
Well, in our stories, we did write about a fellow by the name of Chuck McDougal. He's one of those experts on this whole Yamashita gold story.
According to Greenspun, Chuck McDougal was close to Curtis and knew his secrets.
He could tell you firsthand, probably a lot of what Bob Curtis could tell you.
Talking to Brian, and the fact that he believed Robert Curtis, I mean, that's further confirmation that there is truth in Robert Curtis's story. So unfortunately, Curtis is not with us anymore. I really need to find somebody still alive that knows more about this story, and hopefully that person's Chuck McDougal. If I can track down Chuck, maybe he has information for us that can help us on our search.
The next morning, Bingo calls to update the team.
So guys, I met with Brian Greenspun. He's one of the editors at the Las Vegas Sun. Now, he published a number of articles on Bob Curtis and Yamashita's treasure over the span of about 3 decades. Bob Curtis, he provided a lot of evidence to the Las Vegas Sun and Brian over there. And unfortunately, they don't have any more of that archival evidence or documents left over. What Brian did reveal was potentially a huge clue, the name Chuck McDougal. Chuck McDougal, I did some digging on him, and I found out he was actually working with Bob Curtis. He was working with him on a site called Fort Santiago, and I found some archival news footage of him, and I want you guys to check it out and see what you think. I've already sent it to you.
Okay.
The Fort Santiago press conferences became a regular ritual on the evening news. Facts began to emerge, one by one, from the tight-lipped mouth of Charlie McDougal.
We think it's gold bullion. We have photographs of maps. We have engineering drawings, other photographic evidence to determine the location, the exact location.
Wow, that was pretty interesting.
He talked about maps. It makes me wonder if he actually has those maps still.
If he has those maps still, they maybe he has a map of our mountain. Is there any way that we can get to talk to Charles McDougal?
Well, I tracked this guy down. He's still alive. He's living in the Bay Area currently. He's my next meeting. If I can get any information at all, I'll let you guys know. I'm gonna see what I can find out. The key that'll lead us to finding this treasure could be just one person. Hopefully that person is Chuck McDougal.